Board. I'll be presiding over the meeting this evening until the point of the agenda where we elect the chair for the incoming year. I'd like to start off with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Welcome, and we have two regrets for this evening. So we have regrets this evening from Shauna and from Jessica. And I'll start us off with our roll call. I'm Lauren Bliss, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services for the Durham District School Board.
Eva Kyriakides, Association for Children. Tara Kelly, Durham Down Children's Association. Elizabeth Daniel, the Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region. Donna Edwards, Trustee for Ajax.
Stephen Minton, Trustee for Pickering.
Kim Urger, Elementary Principal Rep.
Connor Jenkinson, System Lead Principal of Inclusive Student Services. Joe Wrigley, Nancy Hayden, System Lead Inclusive Student Services.
Nancy Adams, Inclusive Student Services Lead.
Charmaine Brown, Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children.
Allison Amer, Easter Seals. Milo Eastdale, Director of Education. Lisa Ryan, Replace.
Thank you. Okay, so the agenda, we have a copy of the agenda. It's been provided, and so just ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda. Thank you. Allison, thank you. All in favor? Thanks very much. Agenda is approved. We'll start this evening with the election of the SEAC chair. The election of the SEAC chair is conducted in accordance with the process outlined in the Ontario Regulations 464 and 97. Following this election, the chair will preside over the remainder of the meeting. When two or more members are nominated and agree to stand for position, each shall be given an opportunity to speak to their candidacy before voting begins by confidential ballot. The candidate receiving a majority vote shall be declared the chair, and we have a total of, thank you. And so our majority vote this evening, 4. Voting will take place until under using a confidential paper ballot in the event of more than 2 candidates. And if no candidate has received a majority of votes, the candidate receiving the fewest votes will be dropped from the ballot and another vote will take place, including the remaining candidates. In the event that there are 2 candidates and there is a tie, second vote will take place. And if there's still a tie, there will be a drawing of ballots to determine who, and if there is still a tie, will determine who the successful candidate is. Ballots will be counted by the secondary and elementary representatives this evening, because we don't have secondary with us tonight. If only one candidate self-nominates or is nominated and agrees to stand, they will be acclaimed to the role. And so at this point, I'll open nominations for the position of chair of SEAC. Yeah.
I'll nominate the Kyriakides.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. You accept? Are there any more further nominations? Any further nominations? And last time, any further nominations? Okay, that makes it easy. So the nominations are closed. And so, Eva, congratulations. You've been acclaimed to the role of chair for SEAC for following school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for continuing your confidence in me sitting as chair. So we will move on then to our election of our vice chair, and that process for me is the same as the election for chair. So anybody before your nominations for vice chair? It was yeah. We're doing the same thing as last year. I would like to nominate Tara Kelly.
That's big.
Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? Any further nominations for vice chair? And finally, any further nominations for vice chair? No further nominations put forward. Tara, congratulations, you have been acclaimed. Okay, moving on to item number 6 of our agenda, which is the approval of minutes from the November 6th, 2025 meeting. Has everybody at the table had a chance to review them? Is there any questions or concerns with respect to those minutes? Can I get somebody to put forward a motion to approve the minutes? Tara, seconders, Donna, all in favor? All right, moving on then to our staff report, beginning with our Inclusive Student Services Impact Update on the role of CERTs.
And we'll start with, just before we do the role of the CERT, we just want to share with you the good news from the system video that we've had shared at board. So Ali is all set to do stuff with the video.
We're excited to share a sample of stories that highlight our multi-year strategic plan, MYSP, Pillar of Infrastructure. Josiah Henson Public School and Trillium Woods Public School celebrated their openings this past September. Both schools welcome JK to grade 8 students and feature on-site childcare centers with vibrant spaces for learning and growth, each home to approximately 600 students. These schools are already inspiring the future leaders of tomorrow. On November 19th, our Facility Services Department was recognized by the Durham Greener Buildings Program for their outstanding achievement, reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions thanks to renovations and upgrades at Bow Valley Public School and Mary Street Community School. Bow Valley was awarded the Emissions Reduction Leadership Award for K-12 schools, while Mary Street received an award for Best Emission Performance for a K-12 school. Congratulations! Big things are happening in North Oshawa. Planning for the brand new unnamed North Oshawa Secondary School is in full swing, and we're counting down to its grand opening this September. This new modern high school will welcome students in grade 9, 10, and 11 for an incredible first year of learning and growth. Leading the charge is Principal Alicia Russell, who's already hard at work planning innovative programs and creating the conditions for long-term success. Over the past 4 years, the DDSB has seen incredible growth as more families join our vibrant communities. We're thrilled to share that the DDSB currently has 3 new elementary schools in various stages of construction, 1 in North Oshawa and 2 in West Whitby. All 3 schools are scheduled to open their doors in fall 2026. The DDSB continues to advocate for the spaces our students and staff need to learn, thrive, and succeed. These new schools represent our commitment to ensuring every learner has access to modern, welcoming, and inspiring environments. It's an exciting time for Durham, and we can't wait for what's ahead. Each of our schools are planned, developed, built, and maintained with great care thanks to our planners, architects, facilities, and maintenance teams, with the support of our senior team and our board of trustees. Thank you for all you do to build and create inclusive, connected, and caring community spaces that support our students' success. Thank you to Oliver Haley, grade 9 from Uxbridge Secondary School for reading this month's MYSP update.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellie. And I'll turn it over to Connor just to share a little bit about the most recent impact update.
Yeah, thank you. So volume 3, issue 4, the role of the special education resource teacher. CERTs, as we know them across the system, they play a really vital and integral role across our system. They are special education teachers with special education qualifications who are supporting the majority of our students in placements, including regular class and indirect support, and they provide that indirect support of a special education teacher to so many of our students across the system. They are working side by side with teachers to work on the planning, the programming, that collaboration. They assist in providing educational assessments for students. So when we look at that list across that first page of some of the key roles of the CERT, that's just a small list. When we actually realize what they do across the system and what they are doing to those students, We also know that oftentimes they are one of those first contact points for families when they start to have questions around how their student is learning and ways that the students and their environment can be adapted and how we can meet some of their particular learning interests, some of their strengths, really harnessing their strengths and focusing on some of their needs as well. So they play an integral role. You see them, through IPRC, through the Identification Placement Review Committee, but they do so much more to be able to support learners and work side by side with the educators across their classes. So I encourage you, there's two great quotes in there, one from a teacher and one from one of our DDSB families as well. So I encourage you, please to have a read through that. Also want to add into the space as well when we're starting to think about some of the special education processes. It is December. Going into the brand new year, we are going to be kicking off, and we have already started our process building towards our special education class placement processes. And this is a long process for us as we align directly with our staffing processes and our staffing timelines. We work with a very interdepartmental team. So a lot of people you saw on the infrastructure update, we work directly with the facilities team on how we can look at where classes are placed. We work with our planning department to look at those 3 and 5 year projections where students are going to be situated, as well as the planning on how classes will be moving forward. So as per usual, we will be bringing updates to you as we move through the process and through our consultation throughout the process as we move forward. We're not expecting any substantive and systemic changes that are going to be substantial and significant across our system. So it's going to be very much a similar business that we move forward with. And as we look at timelines, again, we will continue to bring updates throughout the process to SEAC again for their consultation. And once we have a lot of those solidified, but we still work within those staffing timelines as they are critical to be part of that process as well.
Thanks, Connor. I'm going to bring us to gifted review updates. So I wanted the opportunity to come back to the table again and just give you an update at where we're at in the process and really clarify the intention of the gifted review. So we really want to make sure that we understand the gifted student experience in terms of school board. So we are undertaking listening groups with students and parents to make sure we're truly understanding that experience. We also want to make sure that gifted special education program is meeting the needs of our students, and that we're properly aligning our placement procedures with Regulation 18198, so the Education Act, and the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee process. So we know we have a responsibility to ensure that we're providing our students who are gifted with the learning environments that are meeting their needs. At this table last year, there was conversation around ensuring that we're aligning our process, our placement process, with the IPRC process. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what information we've collected up to this point and some of the steps that we're taking to meet those obligations. So at this point, what we've done is we began a jurisdictional scan. And what's been really interesting is really looking at how other boards are determining identification and determining placement for their students. So we've been looking at similar boards to our size and close to us here in the GTA, but also beyond as well. We've also started a literature review of looking at summaries of trends in gifted programming from other boards as well. And other boards have gone through gifted reviews as well. So we've been reviewing some of that data. And I wanted the opportunity for Joe to share with you a little bit about the listening sessions that are planned. Last year, you asked us to make a commitment to ensure that the voices of families and voices of students were part of this process. So Joe is beginning those listening sessions and opportunity for him to share a little bit about what's happening there.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm happy to bring some information forward to share around listening sessions and how those fit into the process. For many around the table, we are familiar with the listening session process because we partnered last year in supporting parents and understanding the lived experience of those parents who have children receiving special education supports, and we piloted a listening session on that site together with SEAC. Really, coming here tonight is asking for members of SEAC to consider knowing our advisory role, for looking for interest, to gather interest in anyone who'd be willing to be part of a working group, to really look at and review the process, specifically to look at two parts and helping to frame the questions. Information is going to be gathered in two ways. One, through what we're calling listening sessions, where we're gathering voice of the experience of students and families who are accessing programming with a gifted ed education, and then further a survey in addition to that. So we're really looking to gather that information together. On the screen in front of you, there are some sample questions. These are very draft and nothing finalized at this point, but just to give a flavor and a sampling of the types of questions we would want, broken down in alignment with our multi-year strategic plan guiding priorities, or guiding principles, sorry, because we really feel that we want to encompass and understand the full experience as possible of those who are within the gifted program receiving that program. There are multiple groups that we would like to hear from. So those would include students who are receiving programming in self-contained special education gifted program classroom, those who are in regular class, and both at the elementary and high school, and then the parents, guardians, caregivers of those students as well. So right now, that's the priority that we're thinking about and planning for. We have initially scheduled in one elementary school to begin before the holiday, and hoping that if there is interest out there from any members of SEAC, that we could connect at the end of the meeting and get contact information. And we can hopefully have a meeting or two virtually to talk a little bit about unpacking and thinking about making sure that we're capturing the sentiments that would be meaningful to understand the lived experiences of our students and families, and moving towards the listening sessions and then further into the service. So if there's any questions for me about that, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I hope, not that I'm pushing it, but I really hope to hear from a couple people. If you'd like to be part of that working group, be greatly appreciated. No pressure.
Thanks, Joe. So as we move through the process, and now that we're starting to collect some data about gifted programming, there's some information and things that we're learning about offerings that we have right now that we wanted to expand upon. So not as part of the review, but as part of the learning from the review process. We wanted to share a little bit of information about some additional opportunities that we're going to offer our students this year. So what we know is that students in special education gifted placements have opportunities to come together centrally at the board office to engage in experiences like theater, sports, and poetry slams. So if you're in at the special education class, you do have that. You are afforded that opportunity. Right now, if you're a mainstream student who's identified as gifted, you don't have an opportunity to participate in those things. So we wanted to open the opportunity to mainstream students as well to engage. So this year, starting this spring, we will be offering 4 events for students who are either in special education gifted classrooms or mainstream classrooms. We'll have theater, sports in February. In April, mainstream students will engage in a technology-focused event. We're just working out the details on that. And our special education gifted class placement students will be participating in Spelling Bee. And then in May, we'll have a poetry slam, and in June, a Think Bowl activity that they're in the process of planning. So as we move forward, we're going to continue to ensure that we're offering opportunities to all of our students who are identified as gifted. We also want to begin to, or continue to, offer professional learning for teachers of gifted students. And so this spring, we're offering sessions for both mainstream gifted programming and special education gifted classroom teachers. And those sessions will be supported by our instructional facilitators for gifted programming. I think what I wanted to share with you this evening is some interesting data that's coming forward about the number that we're seeing is students who are meeting the criteria for giftedness through the CCAT. So in 2016, 2% of students who wrote the CCAT were meeting that criteria of 98%. In 2024, that was 12%. And so, as you can see, the number of students who are, and I think the other piece that's important to note, that actually the number of students writing has decreased. So the so I'll give you that number just so you have it. So in 2016, we had 2,029 students who wrote SEAC. And in 2024, 1,953 wrote. But there's a 10% difference in that timeline. So there are likely a number of factors that are influencing that increase, but we do have reason to believe that there may be preparation for the CCAT happening. The practice tests are readily available online. You can purchase them through Amazon. And so what we want to do is really consider when we're thinking about placement for this year, really making sure that when we're making decisions on placement, that we're considering multiple data sources to determine placement for students. So I'm just going to ask Connor to share a slide here with you that I think is important. So currently in the Durham District School Board, to determine placement for special education classes, we use Regulation 18198, which is IPRC, Identification, Placement, and Review Committee process. And within that process, there's a number of factors that you are to consider when determining or making recommendations around placement for students. So I just want you to have a quick glance at the screen. So if, for example, top row, if I was hoping for a placement in a PLP classroom, when the IPRC committee is looking at placement, we take into account parent preference. First consideration is always regular class with indirect support, if applicable, and meets the student's needs. We look at a triangulation of data, and that data can get from a number of different sources, and there's some examples of what that could potentially be. It's not limited there, but also consultation with ISS school team takes place, and there's a recommendation that comes from the IPRC committee around placement for a student. When we look at gifted, the current process in Durham for a gifted placement is you meet the criteria of 98%, and then essentially it's offered, either placement is offered. So there isn't necessarily a consideration for regular class with indirect support first. We're not necessarily looking at any other data sources. It's essentially, if two placement options are offered to families and students, and they're able to choose one of those. So what we are recommending, we're not changing placement process for this year. We want to continue with the same process. What we want to do is, through the process, ensure that we're basing decisions and recommendations that are being made through the IPRC process based on student need, and triangulating data, looking at report card data, looking at IEP data, looking at any assessment, academic assessment data, teacher observations, conversation with students. So just really making sure that we're doing a comprehensive look at alternate sources of data when making decisions. One of the things that I know is really important is, because IPRC decisions are being made from school to school, extremely important that when those conversations are happening at the table with families and with students, that there's consistency across the system around the understanding of a placement in a special education gifted class or the mainstream placement. So we'll do some work with our special education resource teachers and administrators to make sure there's a common understanding of the decision-making process. I want to share a little more language with you that I think will be important for this year in the placement process. So I just want to point out that Reg 18198 states that when making a placement decision on referral under Section 14, the committee shall, before considering the option of placement in a special education class, consider whether placement in a regular class with appropriate special education services meets the pupil's needs and is consistent with parental preference. So we want to just share the language with you that we want to use this year to help ensure that the decisions are being made in the best interest of all of our students. So Connor, if you could flip to the next slide. So what I've got here on the screen for you is just, we want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of the difference between the two programs, because I'm not sure that we have it in a right now that's really clear to parents what the two offerings are. So what we've done is created an outline for families when they're making their decision. So I'll just share this quickly with you. So students who meet the criteria for an identification of gifted may remain in their home school. An IEP, an individualized education plan, will be created for the student. And within that IEP, the strategies and supports are based on a thorough assessment of the student's strengths and needs and interests. And if you are choosing, if the recommendation is a mainstream program placement, then that student will have the opportunity to remain at their home school with the IEP in place. We will ensure that there's opportunity for them to participate in central experiences, as I said, with other students who are identified as gifted. We'll also look at opportunities to engage with other students with a gifted identification in their own school, if that's applicable, and within the DDSB. And that particular student will receive direct instruction from a mainstream classroom teacher who will receive specialized services from a special education resource teacher, the inclusive student services staff, and instructional facilitators supporting gifted. And then on our next slide, you'll see that if the recommendation through IPRC is a special education gifted class placement, the students that have the opportunity for that placement will attend a school offering gifted programming that is close to their as close to their home school as possible. We'll also have an individual education plan. All students in the class will also have an identification of intellectually gifted. Opportunity to participate in school-based and central experiences and events for students who are gifted. An opportunity to engage with other students in their school and the DDSB with a similar identification. And in-school programming support, again, from the special education resource teacher, the inclusive student services staff, gifted facilitator. So I just want to point out, next slide, if you could, Connor, what the last piece here, and I know this is a lot of language on the screen, but I want to make sure that we're sharing it all with you, is that we want to ensure that there's an understanding that students who may be considered or who have a recommendation for a special education class, they would require differentiated learning experiences of a depth and breadth beyond those that are normally provided in the regular programming. Students who are considered for those special education class placements may also meet one of the following criteria, and you can see them on the screen there. They may show a clear need for enrichment opportunity and or alternative programming. And they may also show evidence of significant challenges in interpersonal relationships, social interactions, and or emotional development within the school environment. So what we're saying is that we want to make sure that when we are making decisions about placements for students, that it really is based on the need of the student, and that making careful recommendations about placement for students. So what I wanted to do is bring all of this language to the table tonight and open up opportunity for feedback and conversation with SEAC and recommendations on moving forward.
Does anybody here have any comments or what they'd like to make or questions with respect to what's here? Yeah.
That's the most informed.
Lauren and I had a great conversation in and around some of this earlier. There was some history, I think, that a lot of people at the SEAC table don't know in around the gifted screening process and how it became what it is right now. Back a number of years ago, the board implemented or was using a program called, I believe it was called Insight. And it was a video. And it was really done, it kind of helped. You didn't need specialized training to run the screening program. But the problem with it was it didn't allow for any accommodations, including the dropping of a pencil. There was no way to pause the video. There was no way to, if a child had to go to the bathroom, if a child had alternate identifications and needed breaks, there was no way to provide any of that. So what we saw happening is that a couple of things were happening, and it also had a very high false positive rate and false negative. So you had kids who have been identified as gifted who actually were not, and you had students who were not being identified as gifted who were. There was a peer review done at the university, I believe it was the University of Calgary. It was my first meeting, I think, as I sat at this chair under Association for Bright Children that I brought forward. And basically this peer review said it was a great screening tool, but in no way should be used as a formal diagnostic tool. So we sat down and had a meeting, and at the time it was superintendent, Richard Canali was the superintendent. Andrea was our system lead. We sat down with Mary Morrison, who was the head psychologist, chief psychologist at the time, and we talked about that. And so what was happening previous to that is that they were doing the CCAT, and a student who scored, I don't know what the percentage was at the time, whether it was 95, between 95 and 90 or 100, or whether it was 96 or 7 and 100. But basically anybody who scored at a certain level on that test, they all automatically went forward for the WISC, the Wilshire Intelligent Index for Children. And that test, so keep in mind the CCAT is actually not an indicator of giftedness. It is a academic test. It's a knowledge test. The WISC is the test for intelligence, right? So that is really the dividing factor, and not one that can be studied for. I know you're not supposed to study for the CCAT, but people are clearly doing it, because when you told me the number 12%, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like that's way more than 2%. Like, we know that's not accurate. So now what do we do about that? Because at the time that what came forward at the time was, well, if a student scores in the 98th or 99th percentile, can we just offer them a position and do only the WISC on the children who score between the 95th and the 97th, to sort of preserve some services of the psychometrists and the psychologists. So that was how it became what it is now. But we obviously no longer working, because people have figured this out and are looking to study for the test. 12% is like, that is, there's not 12% of the population is not intellectually gifted, right? So now I think we need to go back and review that process and say, okay, do we then say 97 and up? We do the WISC, and if you pass the WISC as well, we go back to that's how you're identified, right? I think we need to really look at that identification process again, because I think this is clearly gotten to a point where that's not working for that reason. So that's the other side of it. Some of the problem that we may find is that we have a number of gifted students that within a mainstream class actually underperform. And there's a few reasons for that. One, a very strong gifted trait is, if I already know it, I'm not doing it again. I am not going to keep doing the same math problems over and over and over again. So stop doing the work. I'm bored. I don't see the point. Yeah. Don't start. I'm not doing it. The other side of it is a social side. Is that they look at some of the kids that, especially if they have older siblings who they've seen this with, they figured out, if I show who I am, what I know, talk the way I would talk at home, I don't get accepted. So they underperform intentionally. And I was actually just saying that to Laura, because that was a situation within our households, where my younger daughter saw my older daughter ostracized for using too big of words and that sort of thing. I could not get that child to read a book to save my life up until she went in grade 4. In the first month of school, she's bringing home a permission form for me to sign so she can take out the book Divergent. That was the very first book, that chapter book that child read. And I actually, about 3 weeks later, because I was now having problems getting the homework done, I actually said to my child, and I still am stunned that I said these words, "No reading until your homework is done." And her response was, "Bet you never thought you'd say that to me." No, I did not. So this is some of the issues with this, is that you may have a solid B student who is actually intellectually gifted but isn't showing it. They put up a mask, or they put it up a wall. We have to be careful that we're asking ourselves why. If we see a student test as gifted and yet they're a solid B, then we got to start asking the child, why? Why are we seeing this from you? And see what they have to say, because it could be for a variety of reasons. And then on top of that, you have the high rates of alternate identifications, right? Multiple exceptionalities. including ADHD, which is also sometimes causes that show of underperformance. So I think these things are great. Obviously, Joe, I'd love to help you out with this because I think it's really important, because I do see the issues, and I said that to Laura. I actually see the issues and I don't disagree with the issues. And I've actually had conversations with parents over the years that have been concerning, and I have tried to get to them across to them that this is not an elite class, right? It's not an elitist program. You're going to have the same kind of behaviors in a gifted class that you might see in a mainstream class, and sometimes more because it's consolidated, right? So if that's your reasoning, you got to think about that. Step back and think about that a little bit. One of the things that used to happen is back in the day is, so we had COVID hit and it changed a lot of things. Prior to COVID, the gifted facilitators didn't do orientation sessions, but the facilitators themselves ran that session. And the facilitators talked about giftedness and what it looks like and some of the things you may be seeing with your child, positive and negative, because there's two sides to that it's a double-edged sword, really. And the kids would go off to a gifted classroom and do some activities, maybe get a tour of the school while the parents were listening. But it wasn't a sales pitch. It was just an information session, really was what it came down to. And say, you're going to now go back to your school. You have a decision to make. You're going to talk with your CERT and you're go through this IPRC process. So those boxes used to be ticked a little bit more. Then COVID hit. We obviously the orientation sessions couldn't happen. And a video was made, and that was sort of sent out. I've actually never seen the video, which I would love to at some point, but I've never actually seen the video. And then post-COVID, we had some issues where we had a gifted facilitator who ended up ill, and another person stepped in who didn't have gifted experience. So she handed those sessions to the schools. And the schools took that as an opportunity to do, come to us, come to the program, the kids, join us kind of thing. And then it became more of seeming like a sales pitch. What I would like to see, it doesn't have to be at each school. It could be one evening here at the board, but I would like to see an information session done that explains the difference between the two places, talks about the pros and cons of both, and then says you have to think about what your discussion is going to be with your CERT about what it is that you really truly want for your child, and make sure parents understand what the program is and what it is not, because I think that is a big problem. Because I have had those phone calls. I have been on my neighborhood Facebook chat and saw people asking, how do I help my child prepare? And I'm like, oh my God, please call me. I sent you a DM with my phone number. Please call me. And basically tried to talk them out of that. So we know that's happening. And that has to be solved because it's not helping the child either. At the end of the day, if your child is not gifted, you don't want them in a gifted placement. It's not appropriate. So I think there's issues that we need to look at, and I'd love to work on them together and really sort of drill down on how we can solve some of those. But I question whether or not we go back to doing the CCAT screen and then the WISC, and maybe narrowing the percentage we're doing that on. If you're telling me 12% are already testing at the CCAT, then maybe it's appropriate we're doing the WISC at 97, right? And after that, parents can make a choice if they don't think that maybe their child got missed on that, then they can seek out a WISC privately, right? Both my kids had private psychoeducational assessments, which is where we had that determination. So, that is a possibility, but I think we set the parameters, but I think maybe we need to go back to actually doing the full proper assessment. So that's sort of my 2 cents worth. Elizabeth?
Yeah, and I think this idea about there being a sense of wanting kids to be pushed into the gifted program for sort of back in
message also speaks to that sort of stereotype that often comes up where, you know, these kids have it easy in a mainstream class, and we don't really need to necessarily provide differentiated programming because they're gonna look after themselves and they're gonna do well on their own. And I think that concerns me if we want to make the mainstream placement more robust for gifted kids, then that stereotype has to be addressed too. And there has to be an understanding that special education is not strictly just providing an academic edge. It's not advancing the curriculum. It's expanding in breadth and depth, and it's accommodating a genuine differentiated learning need. Those kids learn differently and require that support, and that is a real and true requirement. It's not something that can be considered secondary to other special education needs. So the concern would be, are those needs really genuine? Too, right? So those pieces I think need to be part of this review.
Kara, just sort of speaking to the whole the potential for gaming the system, shall we say. Maybe part of the whole conversation about this is it's not just for the parents whose children are testing as gifted, but as back to the whole conversation about what actually is gifted, but that needs to be a broader communication to sort of say this isn't, back to your point, a special class. All of a sudden you get this wonderful extra designation and people are going to look at you differently. It's not like all of a sudden I've got my MBA and a PhD and I'm all fancy coming out of grade school. Like that's not what gifted is for. It's a very specific need that is not the typical. Like it's very easy for people to identify my son. He's got a developmental delay, he has speech issues, he has many. So it's like, oh, you need help. But gifted is like, oh, they're fine, and that's the prevailing attitude is maybe we need to get through that. No, they're actually not. There's many other things, the negative sides of that. And so we're not pushing people who don't need that additional support. You can be very smart, but you don't need the gifted program because of all of the other issues. You can be very normally well adjusted and just be smart, and that's okay.
And that's not the same curriculum.
You're going to be the same curriculum, and exactly. So it's just those things. How do we get rid of that stigma? I guess. How do we help get rid of that stigma? Yeah, Donna.
And one of the things that we did talk about, and it was basically around the testing and who gets the testing, because I know the Toronto District School Board actually offers to every student, so that it eliminates biases, because right now our through processes, it's either the parent or maybe the teacher that nominates for those testing. And so, and we're humans. We have biases, right? As far as that's concerned. So there's that whole concern that that's what they do in order to, but this still have to deal with the issue of the studying for, but that's a whole thing. But also, I just know of other boards too. It's interesting because we don't offer an IB program here, but there are other boards, instead of they've eliminated gifted, but they keep the IB program. They put all the gifted students in the IB program, and then that actually is a social economic status sort of thing as well as with that. So I think that because there is a huge, I know there's a huge group of people within Ajax that actually send their kids to York because they still offer the IB program. And so I think you also have to talk a little bit about that, what that is and is not, right? But I think it's this whole ensuring that, we're really looking at equity to access the testing, to ensure that we're inclusive at that point. And then looking at, so that's one of my real concerns at this point in time, because there still is biases on who gets nominated for. I don't know which, because my brain's not heavy. International baccalaureate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
I'll just add a little bit to what Donna says, is understanding the difference between the IB program and a gifted program. The IB program is very, very intense. You must maintain, like, I think it's an 85 or something like that, like a average. If you drop below, out. It's very, very intense. Whereas the gifted program, maybe in high school, is the same thing. It's the same curriculum. It's just differentiated by breadth and depth. We need to understand that because kids have to apply to the IB program. So it's very different. You know, and that is the thing. If we had that discussion earlier when you were talking and child saying, you know, grade 6 is probably a really good example, right? Teachers are all trying to prep the students for EQAO. You've got 30 kids in your class, and you got 5 kids who are below grade level in math, and they're going to have to write the EQAO, and you have this student over here who's gifted. How much attention in supports is the one child over here who's head of the curve going to get, or are they going to be used to try and help assist these other students in bringing up their score, like their abilities? And that's all fine and dandy if some students are okay with that, but it can and does often, and even when you go back to our days in school, puts a target on it, right? And this is where some of the social emotional stuff comes in. Rotera said her son is easy to identify. When you have a student with obvious needs, other students, and not always, but often, and I've seen it, will wrap themselves in that grade level, will wrap themselves in a protectively around that student. That is not the case with a gifted student. It is the opposite generally. So I think we need to keep that in mind too, because, and that isn't just even with kids, but it is also with teachers, because anybody who's dealt with a gifted child will know that they question everything and they will challenge you on everything. And if you make a mistake, you will know it. And people have and my poor mother. But at the end of the day, that is a reality, and it can be frustrating for some people, especially when they don't truly understand it. And that's hard to make sure you get that across the system in every mainstream class. So I think we need to keep those things into consideration as well.
If you get them extra work, you've lost them.
Yeah. They won't do it.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. So there's those things to consider. So we need to look at, I'm glad this discussion is happening. I'm happy to work at any point in any of these discussions with how we can find that sort of middle, right? How we can sort of solve the issues that are clearly issues, right? 12% not Boston, right? So we need to figure those things out, and I'm happy to work together to do that. But I think we have to make sure that we don't use language that was meant to protect very vulnerable kids to deny services to kids who are also need, right? For very different reasons. So we have to remember those things, as was said by Shauna previously. So I want to credit that where credit's due, but that's all I have to say. And I'm happy to continue discussions. So, anything else? Okay. All right. And you guys have all the things, yeah.
Yeah. I have the orientation and mobility specialist. I'll just quickly mention in our board, we have an orientation and mobility specialist. We have a 0.5 or whatever. So just for those of you that aren't aware of the law, an O&M is responsible for instructing travel skills to children who are visually impaired, including the use of canes, dog guides, electronic travel aids, as well as sighted guide technique. We have an O&M whose contract has come to an end. We have posted the position twice and have not had any applicants to the position. It is very difficult to fill. We've reached out to to neighboring boards to find out how they're filling the positions. We've reached out to the college, which is in BC, to ask if they know of anyone that has graduated, has come this way. We have not been able to fill it. We will continue to keep the posting open, but just wanted to mention that we're actively seeking a replacement for the position, and to just bring it to the table for information. And the last piece was at SEAC last year, there was a motion that was passed to create a SEAC year at a glance. And I think the conversation, from my understanding, is that at each meeting, when something came up that was a highlight, we would document that highlight and it would go into the notes as a highlight to put into the year at a glance. Don't think that's happened. I think we forgot to do the highlights. So our last impact update was intended to be, so this impact update was intended to be the year at a glance. I am happy to create the year at a glance in conversation with Eva that we may need a little bit of help going through the 10 months of minutes to identify what these highlights were. I know you've already started.
I think I got two.
I know. So we created a shared document. And Eva has graciously, I think you did January, February already, so thank you. We're looking to see if there are members who might be willing to help us with going through the minutes to identify highlights that they feel should be in the year at a glance. And then I'm happy to move forward and create the document. So just looking for some help with that. It's a big job for one person, not so big if we have opportunity.
Take a couple months. I can probably get back to it early next week.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll have Lisa email out the document to you so that if you would like to sign up for some of the months just to cover, that would be great. We'll just make a call on Lisa to add the name of the person who's going to do that summary. So appreciate that and thank you very much for that.
Okay. All right. Moving on to our board report, and I believe Stephen is taking that.
Or maybe welcome to your first meeting.
Oh, good.
There you go.
No problem. So at a high level, so we spoke about the extension of the Violence in Schools ad hoc committee and extending their mandate through February 2026. And that will include a report back from this committee, the Parent Enrollment Committee, and some other boards around what they've done around violence in schools. So we are to a report back in February. There was also the approval of the policy development process policy, and this was recommended through the Governance and Policy Committee. There was also an approval of the plan to transition and rescind and consolidate all of the DDSB regulations and this was recommended by the Governance Policy Committee. And we also went through the approval of the plan for staff to prepare revisions to the trustee expense policy as recommended by the Governance and Policy Committee. Then as for some information items, the 2025 Director's Annual Report was provided. There was a summary from the Audit Committee. There was conversations around the Education and Finance Committee meeting dates for the 2026 and 2027 budgets. There was the redesignation of the growth update, and there was information around addressing anti-Semitism in the Durham District School Board. And as for memos, we spoke about the revised policy development process policy. And just in terms of some of the upcoming meetings, the Special Education Advisory Review, which is right now, the Governance and Policy Committee, and then the first meeting of 2026 will be the Standing Committee meeting on January.
Does anybody have any questions for Stephen with respect to the board report?
Not the report, but I just like to add that because I mean, I'm sure people have seen the stuff in the news and so forth, and as far as this whole thing, and we talked a little bit about basically obviously the role of trustees. And I mean, the latest thing is that what we've heard is it's always in the news. But we know that he is doing a governance review for the role of trustees, and we don't know what that's going to look like. But he just did mention that that he won't have any legislation done by the end of the year. So the Queen's Park basically rises on the 11th of December, and they don't return until after Family Day. So we don't expect anything as far as that's concerned. And so that's just sort of where the status is, and there is a variety of campaigns, and it's not really, as I said, it's not about keeping jobs, it's about the advocacy of parents. And there's several groups out there, but which I also get with, but just so you know that, that's basically what we're dealing with, that also from a provincial perspective, but ensuring that parents' voice is heard, and that through somewhere. There is the establishment of a student parent support office, information office, whatever everybody's calling it slightly different, that those boards that were basically under supervision were to establish it for basically the beginning of the new year, whereas all the other boards was planned together for by March and implementing for September 1st, 2026. So just thought I'd say.
Do you have any questions? Just for that? And just in case anybody's wondering, I believe it's Bill 30, not it's 33. Bill 33, yeah. Okay.
That was passed.
Yeah, yes, we knew it would be passed. And it basically gives the government the ability, if they so choose, to eliminate the role of trustee, which means that local voice for parents and local contact for parents disappears. And if anybody's ever had to deal with a government agency, I don't have a lot of faith in the idea of student parents, sort of office that you can go to that is servicing maybe multiple wards, many students. It takes a local and understandable way, especially when you're talking to a supervisor who does not know the difference between services, just especially for special education. And basically, when you're talking to somebody who doesn't understand the difference between an ECE or right or an EA, that's a problem. But yeah, I don't know whether or not it's something that the committee wants to, write a letter sort of putting their opinion forward or not, or whether there's discussion that wants to be had around the table with regards to that. But it is, I think, primarily a concern for students, the families of students with special education needs, if they're not in agreement with what's happening with the school. Or even with discussions at the board level, where did they go? Who did they go to? And what is that voice lost? Because I think that's.
And well, the other concern right now is, as well as that the minister has put a hold on basically the education consultation for the budget. They basically put a hold on that. They said but they are still proceeding, and they started today for the provincial budget for consultation. So I know that like senior business officials are going to put in their comments as a whole provincially. They're going to put their comments out. So is the Ontario Public School Board Association is still going to submit something through, because you can still submit through writing from that perspective. But I mean, again, there's that voice that has that collective voice from, trustees do, as I said, represent communities, and we put those facts forward together in submissions, and we do present. So there's also that piece that is very disconcerting, because I've read all the reports that have come from the supervised boards. And one of the common themes in there, it says that all those boards overspend the envelope for special education, and that there is a need in special education, yet it's not being addressed. And so that's my huge concern, that that's going to be, yes, they are going to be talking. They've also setting up this review committee on student achievement, which was just announced the other day, as well. But I'm really concerned about our most vulnerable students and their needs not being addressed.
And we've done so said, and then get the report from
There for each, there was an investigation and a report, basically a funding report that was done for each of the boards that were under supervision. So for Ottawa, the first, even near North, that was just recently taken over as well. And if you look at most of those reports, you will see they talk about, but those were mostly focused on financial. And they basically say that all those boards have overspent the special education budget allocation.
They no longer do that.
No, they don't make any recommendations for that like that.
Okay.
But it just saying that they, that it's just not being addressed. And the minister has said many times and quoted saying that if the supervisors see there's a need for funding, then they can come to him to address it. And yet that specific funding has not been addressed. So that's my whole concern, is that we're all over here, but it's been shown in every one of those reports that spec ed envelope is over, or more money.
Nothing we don't all know.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Well, it's this. Who doesn't? And but yet he still says that if there is a need, and I'm kind of going, well, your reports do say that.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been addressed, and it's not being addressed.
And which SEAC hasn't told you for the past several decades.
Well, we know it. So
it's not been
and so it's definitely and plus I'm a broken record with the Education Standards Development Committee has over 200 recommendations on how to change things. We were not allowed to talk about funding. We had to look at what are the processes and legislation and how to change things to make it better. So there's 200 recommendations that he could start with, and that report is now coming up to 5 years old.
The summer we spent putting that together.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything to add on this? The question is, do we want to write a letter? I mean, it'll probably just go into the abyss. We have not received a comment on our previous letter at all. But do we want to forward our thoughts on the role of trustees and our students with special education needs, or thoughts? I've been thinking. We can talk about it in the next meeting. This bill's not going away and they're going on vacation. So if we want to think about that, right? We can do that before they can. We can do that. We can circle around and have that discussion, especially if people want to take a look at Bill 33 and see what's in. And I think you might be surprised. But there's a few pieces of legislation that have gone out recently that are concerns, but that's the one that directly affects this table. That's for sure. So, okay. Any other questions with respect to the board report? Okay, moving on to the business arising from the minutes, and the first one is our member at large. So, Jessica, Tara, myself, and Lawrence sat down when we had 76
applications.
Wow.
It was a lot.
There's a little bit of a story, but it was great. It was good to have more than less at the end of the day. So, when we sit down as a committee, we often will ask ourselves, what do we have around the table? And is there are candidates that stand out from that? Like, can we see if somebody in that list of candidates that brings something different that's already sort of represented around the table? And we had I would say, because I've done a number of these, this was probably one of the hardest decisions to come up with this time there, because we had a few really good ones and we got it down to 2, and it's like we could really go either way. Like it was really hard. Ultimately, so I'll bring for our candidate A, which is the one that the committee itself would put forward as we think this is the one we should offer to. If the decision still sits around the SEAC table. So I'm going to sort of highlight some characteristics of both candidates. So candidate A is an adopted lead technologist at Centennial College. They provide direct assistive technology support to students. They've authored educational resources on digital accessibility, worked in a temporary position as a human rights officer, understanding of systematic barriers and responsive policy design. They have an equity lens and lived experience, community-rooted knowledge of disability justice, and is a person of disability themselves and a person of color. Candidate B is a social worker by education and experience, worked with children with disabilities, mental health diagnosis, and differentiated learning needs. 9 years working at Autism Ontario. Worked at the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, now MCSS. Worked on Ontario Autism Program. Senior leader at Canark Child and Family Services. Executive Director for Resources for Exceptional Children and Youth. Improving the service system for children that experience complex challenges. Sits on SEAC, the Durham Catholic Board of Directors for Community Living North in North Durham, volunteer with the Special Olympics of Durham Region, as a parent of 3 children, one who has a rare developmental disorder, non-speaking, and uses AAC for communication and access education from a PLP. As you can see, both candidates these are great, right? So we really tried to narrow it down then from that point, from that perspective. We started to look around, sort of also who do we have sitting around the table, right? And outside of one of our trustees, welcome, and Rowan, who's here sometimes for the Disabilities Association, we don't have a lot of male voice around the table. So that was another deciding factor, was looking at that as well. So that's why we sort of ended up leaning towards candidate A, because both had a lot of really good credentials that we could, it was really hard. Yeah. So took a long time. Yes. So the committee is suggesting candidate A, but we can have that discussion and hear your thoughts around the table as well. Does anybody have anything? Hey, Jen, you look like you have something you'd like to say.
Why not take the 2 of them?
If we could, we would. Large alternate.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't work.
I know you tried really,
Jen, honestly, we were like,
how so hard.
yeah.
We couldn't make it.
This is a good problem to have.
It's definitely a great problem to have. It is a really fantastic problem to have, but a problem nonetheless, because we had to make a choice and because we have one position. So for me.
I was thinking the same as Jen.
We tried to make it work. And we called in Andrea at one point to ask questions. We
Called Donna.
texted Donna to ask questions, like, can we make this work? And we couldn't. So at the end of the day, we had to go, if we had to pick one.
So we had to find
So we
a
had-
defining factor.
Yeah.
Like you really feel for those people who are hiring for position and you got like, you know, two perfect candidates and you got to figure out which one you're going to offer to that like this is where we were at. Like,
Yeah, I know it sucks. We're both of they do.
Elizabeth?
Is there a possibility of the one that won't select, can we find some encouragement to maybe find an association that they might be interested in?
100% we would do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was some discussion about whether or not, you know, as part of their employment, whether there's a sitting as a advisory non-voting position sort of thing, and also discussion about whether or not they had a parent committee, much like Grandview has. So we had discussions around that, but
There's no such thing as a the way our bylaws
Yeah.
are rewritten.
Yes,
Or
that's-
right here, right?
Yeah.
It to reflect, we used to have a non-voting rep, which was outside of the regulation for SEAC. And that was changed, previously, so that we just adhere to the regulation. That was, because we used to have, resources for exceptional children here, we used to have, Kinark here.
but
as well.
did they just not have people forward, or because we also had the consortium for like daycare consortium, right? Childcare.
Not here on the table. This is like this, we're talking.
Back in the day, but
Back,
yeah.
way back when,
Yeah.
when I was a parent on the thing, we actually had, and then that they were a non-voting member, but they, you know, they had voice around the table and provided a lot of really great information that we really appreciated at that, and at that point in time. But yes, what happened was those individuals eventually moved on, and so, and they were strapped, so they wouldn't provide, you know, they couldn't provide somebody here. But then we've changed our bylaws so that it reflects, it adheres exactly to the regulation. Yeah, regulations. So we aren't allowed, you know, well, that's not true. You could have, but then you'd have to change the bylaws again. So, so that's the way, but you're very right that if they were a representation of one of the, because I look at some of the associations that we used to have around the table that are not, still not. And we do have space. We still
But
have.
we have space because we can have 12 or things.
Yes.
Have space.
You still have space,
Yeah.
as far as that's concerned.
We
So-
do. So if we can, like, that's something we would definitely recommend that they look at doing. Because obviously both people bring some pretty great voice to the table. But we haven't just had it, we had and still have the decision to make on going forward. So I need a motion from somebody around the table, but basically for candidate A B or B, whichever you choose. Put a motion for accepting candidate A or B.
can't pick both. Sorry.
Yes.
We cannot pick both.
I know,
Tried.
Candidate was the male candidate.
first one, candidate A.
That was our recommendation in the second.
It is.
Motion, okay, so any seconders for candidate A? Elizabeth, all in favor? Because
No, because it always, the way it works when it comes to, it goes to trustees anyways, they actually, you guys make a recommendation, right, or the board. So I feel it's always a conflict, but I abstain from voting at this level.
But the motion has passed regardless, but yes.
Yes.
So that the motion really is to send that to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Yes.
Yeah, we did second.
No,
Sorry,
yeah,
Elizabeth seconded.
Thank you.
All right. So I can't remember if we reached out to them before or after it was board.
It has to go to board first.
So wait till we reach out to them.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll pass that
Yep.
information on who it is.
Yeah, we'll handle that.
To
Yeah.
Dawn.
Yeah, well, and that don't come until January anyways, because we don't have any boards until January.
Are we allowed to say the name yet? That we voted? That's
Yes.
forward? Okay.
Yes.
So we have agreed to put forward Lyle Williams for the member at large position to request that the Board of Trustees approve them as our member at large. So that's moving on then to action planning for the Special Education Parent Caregiver Symposium, February 10th, 6 p.m.
Clutter, there's a slide there that relates to that. Wanted to share, we're excited to, I know we briefly talked about it last SEAC, but February 10th, we're going to offer a special education parent caregiver symposium here at the board office. I just wanted to give you a brief outline. In conversations that have happened here at the table, there's been coming out of the SEAC survey, there were some very distinct themes that we picked up on. And there was in our last meeting, you gave some excellent feedback on action items that we should be addressing to bring forward to address it. I think this symposium is a beautiful way to start to build some of that, open those lines of communication, build some supports for families to navigate the special education inclusive student services system here at DDSB. So Connor, if you can flip to the next slide. Right now, what we're looking at hosting on February 10th, from 6 to 8 p.m., we'll be inviting families to come to the board office to attend sessions, and you'll be able to sign up for 3 to 4 sessions that evening. They'll be about 30 minutes long. And what I've got on the screen for you here is some of the options that parents will be able to visit. So if you look at just quickly the IPRC process, for example, what are some of the pathways for secondary students, understanding supports available in their elementary schools and secondary schools, what are the alternative learning opportunities in secondary? Next one, if you could, Connor. Coming out of our last SEAC meeting, I can't remember which member it was, but we talked about understanding student safety at school and student safety planning, looking at the IEPs and a collaborative approach with families, understanding placement options in secondary. Also had a request to bring the presentation that happened here with Amanda Gleed and Jackie Portamani forward to have others hear that presentation as well. So they're willing to join us. And then really looking at technology to support our students. So right now, that is the outline. That's just a starting point, and that's coming out of feedback from conversation at this table. So we wanted to share that with you. We will happy to have any feedback from this table, further feedback about sessions that you might want us to consider offering in that evening. If you think of anything, I'm happy to have feedback. And Connor, I'll just get you to flip to the next slide if you don't mind. And then I wanted to just bring back when we did the post-it note activity or the poster activity at last SEAC, I summarized the feedback that we provided in the post-it notes. So one of the key areas coming out of the SEAC survey was communication with families as an area of focus. In the center column is what the feedback was from SEAC about what we should focus on. And what I wanted to share with you would be in the last column is DDSB system next steps to respond to the feedback that we've received from SEAC. So appreciated the feedback you gave us about the website. It was fantastic. And so knowing that we'll rework our DDSB Inclusive Student Services website to make it easier to access the information for families. And next one, Connor. You also talked about a key or a focus area being ensuring the implementation of the individual education plan. We did talk about the IEP Educators Guide and how we share that out this fall with educators. What the next step is there is how are we going to monitor the implementation of that guide. So a commitment there as our next step to monitor implementation of that. And then I wanted to just also mention one of the, and sorry, Camille, you happen to sit right by my poster there. The revision of the menu pathways to success flowchart. We talked about it briefly in one of our previous meetings. So this really is a document that that is that flowchart to that process of from starting to notice that my, what do I do? I'm noticing my student has some needs. Who do I talk to at the school? What is my process? And it really outlines the process that a parent and a teacher and school staff will follow. But what we wanted to really do here is build in the connection and communication with families. So a revision to this particular document to tie in the importance of that connection to family is another area that we intend to focus on. And last but not least, what can we, one back, Connor, I think, sorry, you went too fast for me. There was an area of focus that you requested of what can we do to support inclusive learning environments that are, environments that are inclusive for all students. One of the things that I just wanted to mention at the table here is we've been working as a system on everyday conditions for learning, really building classroom environments that focus on the well-being, ensuring that students feel welcome, that they feel that they belong, that they're cared for. So that process of building these inclusive classrooms is deeply embedded this year into our school achievement plan. So superintendents are visiting schools and speaking with administrators and visiting classrooms and monitoring the implementation of those everyday conditions for learning. And when we're doing those visits to schools, conversations are happening about how are you making this happen in your classrooms? What does that look like? So I wanted you to know that that commitment is built into the school achievement process. So it's a process that we follow from September to the end of the year to monitor those expectations and those inclusive expectations in those classrooms. So I wanted to share that with you because I think that's really important for you to know. And last but not least, we talked about how can we increase awareness of supports and accommodations available to our students. And so coming out of that, there was a suggested action of a community event. So bringing February 10th forward in terms of the symposium. So just wanted to add some action items to the feedback that we received from SEAC.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Suggestions? Dan?
How soon are we gonna start promoting this to these schools so that the parents can be aware of the program? Because February is not too far from here.
Great question. Our first meeting with communications is December 7th. So as soon as we have that meeting, we'll start the process of developing communication.
Anybody else?
Yeah. One of the comments that I know that this is feedback here, but I'm just wondering again, as where we can ensure that we have links to a variety of people here in SEAC at some of those sessions to ensure that they see the parent voice as well. And that's the real,
Thank you, Donna. I should have said that. So community partners, all of the SEAC community partners have been invited to join.
Okay.
So we have reached out and they'll have opportunity to have a table and be able to speak to parents, and SEAC members obviously will be happy to join us that as well that night.
Anybody else? I've already let Lisa know I'll be there, so happy to do that. I don't know if anybody else is planning on coming, but Alice will be there, so Jen will be there. So if we can have SEAC table,
You have the SEAC table.
I think we have a sign. Do we not still have the sign, the SEAC sign? Andrea would know.
As you go, we had a pretty large Gilbert Hall garden. So, it's not something I've seen in
Because
that's it's like
I think we can probably figure out SEAC.
Yeah, it was one, I think, like it's.
We could have
Hold
one.
up, but
Yeah.
we had one at one, we used to have it out, remember when
Yep.
we went, had the welcome back barbecues?
Yeah.
Tara and I did a few of those. We
I
had
just
it, yeah.
with heavy magnets more than once. I'm not bitter about that at all.
So I'm just, maybe we could take a look. We still have time between now and February 10th.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
because I
we can have one.
It will be
Besides
a
important.
okay, just so they know who we are and that way
I have it in my schedule.
you have it in your schedule. So it looks like we'll have a fairly good SEAC turn. Okay. What's the timing of that one?
6 to 8.
Thank you. 6 to 8. 6 to 8.
Yes.
Here.
Here.
Yes, in the big room.
It's actually everywhere. We're taking over the whole room. We're taking over everywhere.
Excellent. Good to hear. All right. Moving on to the other one was April 9th. SEAC meeting conflicts with Passover and is suggested to move to April 16th. Is that a Tuesday, the 16th?
Oh, the Thursday, sorry. It's okay, that's fine. It's okay. 16th is a Thursday.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I'll be able to make that meeting. Does anybody else have concern with that?
Actually,
Christine?
I'm 17. I don't have anything that I see.
I think Jessica said she was good with the 16th. Is she in her email? So. What about your alternate? You think they can come? If it's this much notice.
I'm gonna be away from the 10th to the 17th, so any other.
Yeah.
Tuesdays.
Yeah, there's Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, Thursday, sorry.
I did it too, sorry, Jen. It was my
Tara
fault.
started.
Picking up Tuesday, so that's why.
Yeah, Tara started.
I know, I
It's not your
started
fault.
it. Sorry.
Yeah,
I just wanted you, the reason we didn't pick the first Thursday is it's the date. We thought we made.
yeah, we should put
We're
our
not too much further into a program.
then right, we might, as we have the March meeting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
As you passed a motion to approve the meeting dates, you need a motion to.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Okay.
I was just
Yeah.
trying to get the
Okay.
feeling around the room. I was just about to say, I think, would we get a motion? So could somebody make a motion for the 16th?
There's also the 26th of March here.
26th March, I mean, April?
No, because originally the date would have been the first Thursday of April, which is April 2nd.
Right, but then we have 2 meetings in March.
Yeah, so
And you
you
gotta
either
think
have,
of March break.
right,
Yeah.
you either have 3 weeks between those 2 meetings, or you have 3 weeks between the April and May.
I think it's easier for minute wise if we stay in April. Then it's easy to identify that there's a meeting a month, right?
Yep.
So can I get a motion to approve moving?
That's okay.
To the meeting to the 16th.
Motion to
Tara?
16.
Any seconders? Allison? All in favor? Okay, motion is passed. We'll fill you in on all the deeds afterwards.
Okay.
Until you get the big.
Okay.
Association reports and committee reports. I don't think anybody have any? Jen, go ahead.
For the PIC, I went to the SEAC, the big expose that they had here in, I think it was October. And I was facilitating a group, and what the results out of the group were, we needed to kind of get more parent engagement in the secondary sector. We found that more parents in the elementary sector were engaged, but once the kids transitioned into high school, like the parent involvement was like down to almost non-existent. So we're trying to figure out ways of getting that engagement up there. The next part is that we had different subcommittees on the PIC, and I was chosen to do the programs. To allocate and approve the funding for $5,000 for the different schools for what they would do to engage the parents. And a lot of the threads that are coming in are either STEM or a lot of mindfulness, mental health connections that are through the grants. What I'm asking though for our SEAC group is there's a communication group that they're trying to facilitate speakers to come in. But what I'm seeing, there's a gap that there's no speaker like addressing people with the special ed part of it, like more inclusive speakers coming in. So I don't know if we want to suggest some thoughts on what kind of speakers we could have come in to represent what we represent here. Don't have to come up with it tonight, but
Something to think about,
yes.
because I'm sure there are people who,
Or
What do you-
topics.
well, yeah, what do you sort of look for, Jen? Like, what, for as a speaker, is it just, what is this group in particular, or what does SEAC in general?
Yeah, like, you know, we promote like inclusivity and accessibility. So I'm just gathering feedback from us to have us represented there. So
I'm just thinking of the speaker that we had at Oxford, and he's really great. And he's heard his name in the news probably too, is David Lebowski. Did a really, really good conversation about accessibility in education and what it means. And he himself has a disability. Yes, child with autism. And so he's a really phenomenal speaker. And he's actually the chair of Toronto SEAC as well. So, you know, there's actually a
couple of them. I'm just wondering when you're looking at,
yeah.
when you're looking at them for, what's the timing?
early next year.
Early next year.
So what I could do then, I would just give them the feedback because I'm not a part of the speakers committee, I'm part of the programs.
Mhm.
But I noticed that there was a gap for
Missing it.
representation. So I just thought, you know what? Let them know that we would be interested to have some of the speakers speaking on our behalf too. So,
That's something to consider. To think about it, you know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about, we just want to make sure that, would it be possible to maybe create a central list? Because then we have to be cautious. We want to make sure that speakers that we do bring into schools are approved speakers. So, but if we had a central list, what we would be able to do is just have the names and then have opportunity to vet to make sure that it would be appropriate for students. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That way, then we have
it's actually more for parents. They're bringing in the speakers more for the parents of the students.
okay.
Yeah.
We still want to make sure that any speakers that do come that we present through the school are vetted to make sure that
Okay.
they align with our values and visions. So
Okay.
yeah. But we can certainly assist with that.
Yeah. So if anybody can think of anything, maybe we add a list and. Okay.
Sure as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Jen? With respect to the PIC report? Parent involvement committee. Thank you for continuing to sit on that committee. It's great to have our voice because you picked up on something that you wouldn't have been picked up on otherwise, right? Which is really important. Okay. Correspondence, we have none. Community concerns. We had asked that people sort of provide that sort of the beginning or the week before so that we could have the answers ready. I don't know if anything has come forward.
But just a reminder if there's anything like that, that way we're not getting, I'll have to get back to you. Well, some answers can be provided at the time, questions asked. Celebrations and successes.
I have none, so.
I was gonna say, because I knew you was looking at me.
Yes, Adam had his 19th birthday grown-up party at our local watering hole. And it was really more for the parents than all the adults that have known him since he was the grasshopper. Oh, gosh, I'm so old. Oh my goodness. It was honestly a real fun. But we busted out the karaoke machine. We had a great time, and yes, he did have his own first drink with his friends and family around with him. And thankfully, he did not enjoy it. So accomplished by me. So Mama came out happy at the end of that one. I have pictures and a video apparently of me dancing to Sweet Caroline at some point, if anyone wants to see that.
It's fantastic. Anybody else have any celebrations, successes? Let's share. Donna?
It's actually with Special Olympics that we actually have a team from two teams actually, female and male basketball team that have basically gone to the Fire Basketball World Championships, basically in Santa Claus.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, that's it. Anyways, and so, and there is, as I said, they're Jake Clippers, both of them basically are going. So there's kudos, and it's from December 5th, I think, to whatever. But it's this. They're leaving soon, but they're there probably. They're left Thursday, but I think that's really cool.
Good to hear. Well, good luck to them. I hope your good results coming back. Yeah. That's a huge achievement no matter what. So yeah. Anybody else? All right. No, nothing else. Our next meeting is January 8th, right here. Motion for adjournment. Tara, seconders. Elizabeth, all in favor? All right, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.